Okay, so for this kind of inequality, we're looking at a rational equation. So my preference on those, you could do a sign chart or you could do test points. I find test points annoying, so I usually do a sign chart. But test points would work equally well if you like doing arithmetic. I just don't. So I'm going to make a sign chart. My first step is to factor that numerator as always so we can figure out where our zeros are. So it looks like I have zeros at x equals -1 and 1, and then I have an undefined point at 4. So I have to be careful not to include this one because it came from the denominator. But I do want to, because it has an equals on it, I do want to include the -1 and the 1 because those ones actually equal 0 when we get to the answer at the end here. So let me set up a sign chart. We're going to have x plus 1, x minus 1, and x minus 4. And then 1, 2, 3. Don't worry about scale if you do this. Just make it as clear and easy to read as you can. So I never space these out when I just try to make 4 equal regions so I can check my signs. So we have a 0 at 1, or -1. We have a 0 at 1. And then we have an undefined point at 4. And then let me divide this up so you can kind of see the regions. And then what I'm going to do is check the signs for x plus 1 on each of those 4 regions, check the signs for x minus 1 on each of those 4 regions, and check the signs here. And I say I'm going to check the signs, but I'm not really going to check the signs. I'll do it a couple of times here so you can see the pattern. But here, if I use, say, -2 as a test point, -2 plus 1 would be -1, so that would be negative. Here, if I pick a number between -1 and 1, I'll pick 0. 0 plus 1 would be positive. It's going to go -0 positive because this is a line with a positive slope, and so it's going to be negative on this side of the 0 and positive on this side, and it's going to stay positive. So like here, if you test -2, it's negative. If you test 0, it's negative. If you test 2, it's a positive. If you test 5 in there, 5 minus 1, that's positive. So you can see it's going to fill in -0 positive, -0 positive, so it's going to go negative, negative, negative. There's the 0, and it's going to be positive down there. So it looks like it's a lot, but kind of once you get used to that pattern, the only thing that changes that is if there's a negative on the x, and then it actually reverses it. And then for me, I would just go 3 negatives makes a negative down here. 2 negatives would make this region positive. 1 negative would make that region negative, and then 3 positives would make that region positive. From there, what did we want? We wanted greater than or equal to 0. So we want the zeros, so that's the -1 and the 1. We don't want that 4 though, because that came from the denominator. It's undefined, so I want to make sure I use an open point there. And then we want greater than, so we want this spot right in here, because that was positive. And then we want this part right out there, because that is positive. And again, you can do the same thing. I'll just set it up here and not do all the steps to it, but if I set up a number line and do -1, 1, and 4, and right there I can go, if I want to include zeros, I'm going to need these two. And I know I can't include that endpoint on the 4, so I could set that up. And then I could do test points. So here you could literally do x equals -2 and plug it in here and see what happens. X equals 0, plug it in there, see what happens. Between 1 and 4, I would probably pick 2 would be convenient. And then out here you would pick x equals 5. And if you do that, when you plug in -2, it's going to come out to a negative, whatever the number is. When you plug in 0, it's going to come out to a positive, just like up here. when you plug in 2, for instance, 2 minus 1 is 1, 2 minus 4 would be negative, and that's negative 1/2. So that region would be negative. You plug in a 5. 25 minus 1 is positive, divided by 5 minus 4 is also positive, so that would be a positive. So here I'm just kind of representing it as signs, and when you do with the sign chart, you're doing the actual calculation. I find this easier, and it's confusing to learn how to do this, so for some people, if you don't have too much of this, test points might be the easier way, but they both work.